social media, it's a reality of its own. It's even called many times the digital world. It shows everybody's life through rose-colored glasses. And no matter how good of a heart, how good of a mind you have, the thing is, there's no such thing as harmless, casual consumption. Even if you're not engaging in social media actively, even if you're just consuming, it will affect you. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم صلى الله عليه وسلم. As social media has taken over the world like a storm, it's everywhere. It's now at this point, it's nothing out of the ordinary. But as Muslims, we always need to take a step back and analyze in these situations, these new things that arise. What does Allah want from us? And what did the Prophet ﷺ teach us? We as Muslims, we don't do just what everybody is doing because they're doing it. In fact, Allah, He condemns this. He says, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And rather, if you see most of the people, they don't know what they're doing. And in general, in the way we interact with social media, if we look at the divine guidance of Allah, there's a lot of considerations we can find with regards to how we interact with it. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا لِلنَّاسِ فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ. We have certainly diversified in this Quran every kind of example for mankind. So if we analyze social media from this aspect, if we look at it, what is social media really? It's a tool to show off your life and to see the life of others. And what it does in this specific way, it shows everybody's life, whether we're showing our life or looking at somebody else, it shows it through the rose-colored glasses. It doesn't show the harsh realities. It doesn't show the whole truth. It's very manipulative in this way. So in this way, it's a perfect breeding ground for hasad or jealousy. And no matter how good of a heart, how good of a mind you have, the thing is, there's no such thing as harmless, casual consumption. Even if you're not engaging in social media actively, even if you're just consuming or observing, it will affect you. The more you see, or the more other people see of your life, hasad can easily develop. And the Prophet ﷺ, he advised directly against this when he said, seek help in your needs being met by being discreet. Because everyone who is blessed with something, then he is envied. The other aspect of this observational consumption is that social media encourages you to share everything about your life. The good, the bad, the ugly. And as a result, we see a lot of people, when they're engaging with social media, when they're posting, they might show some of their flaws, their mistakes. They might even be being foolish. And what this does to the observer is that it distracts you from your own flaws, and you begin to focus on the flaws of everybody else. To such a point, it overcomes you, and you completely forget about your own flaws. You completely forget about your own self-improvement. And social media, it amplifies this. Because if you see a person on social media, you don't know them in person. If you see them doing good, you're going to assume this person is always good. If you see one thing that's bad, you're going to assume this person is always bad. And the Prophet ﷺ, he guided us with regards to this when he said that the believer is the mirror of a believer. And the believer is a believer's brother. He guards him against loss and he protects him when he is absent. The reverse of this is to actually engage in social media, to post, to share, to actively share your life, whether it's for personal reasons, business, dawah, etc. There's two big considerations regarding this. One is how accidentally you can corrupt your intention because you're sharing your religious devotion. In general, you can, because Allah said, "In tubdu sadaqati fa ni'immahi." If you give, if you donate openly, then it's good, then it's okay. Wa in tukhfuha wa tu'tuha al-fuqara fa huwa khairul lakum. But if you do it in secret, that's even better for you. But if you're doing it on social media, then the platform is already there to corrupt your intention, to do it to show off rather than for the sake of Allah. And the most famous hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said that all actions are judged according to the intentions, and everybody is rewarding according to what they intend. The second part of this is sharing your worldly blessings, sharing what you have, what you're eating, what you're experiencing in life. And I recall something very peculiar happened, something very strange happened this Ramadan. When in Ramadan, the Muslims around the world, they were sharing their lavish iftars, they're sharing what they're eating, they're posting it online for everybody to see. We have to realize that on a platform like this, everybody can see us, the haves and the have-nots. And when all these lavish dinners, these iftars were being posted, the people in Gaza, they didn't even have anything to break their iftar. They're starving. Still, the case is the same. And when this was happening, a lot of journalists from Gaza, they were saying, we can see this, so at the very least, don't post. Eat, yes, enjoy the blessings of Allah, but at the very least, don't rub it in our face. And there were some very strange responses. And some of the people, they were saying that, oh, just because this is going on, we can't live our life anymore. And there's two fundamental things we learn from this. Number one, the control, the hold, this dopamine of social media engagement, comments, likes, etc., it has on our minds, it became even greater than our concern for the feelings of our brothers and sisters. And number two, it demonstrates a huge shift in psychology that social media has done. When people are saying this term, that I cannot live my life, nobody tells you you cannot live your life. Nobody said you cannot enjoy the blessings of Allah. But for some reason, now we think that we did not experience whatever we experienced. We did not eat whatever we ate until we posted on social media. It's because social media, it's a reality of its own. It's even called many times the digital world. And one of the most sinister uses of this digital world, of this reality, is its inclination towards misinformation and propaganda. And this is clear to us, the Muslims or not Muslims, especially with all the Hindutva bots, the Zionist bots that are flooding our timelines and our posts. And about this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqum binaba'in fatabayyanu. O believers, if an evildoer comes to you with news, then investigate it. أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. So in case you don't harm a people out of ignorance and you become regretful over what you have done. So social media is notorious for warping this kind of information. It's notorious for warping narratives, political, historical, religious. And I recall an imam, he said something that pretty much summarizes this in a really good way. He said, number one, social media, it gives a platform to whoever, no matter what they're saying, if they're informed or if they're uninformed, and they can go on there and say anything. And the second thing, what this does, if they get some engagement, if they get some followers, they really start to feel like they are someone, like there's someone of importance. And then he said, when we look at Muslims today, when we look at the media that Muslims mainly consume on social media, and the media that is produced, the content that is produced from certain, I want to say Muslim influencers, or from even people that are saying we run a da'wah media company. Most of it, what do you see? You see petty arguments. You see arguments on sectarian differences. You see exposing videos. Who is exposing who? This group, they did this. This other group, they did that. That is majority of the content you see Muslims discussing on social media, and that's being produced. And what does this do to the Muslims? What's the end result of this? Is it productive at all? Number one, what it does for the Muslims who don't have the best Islamic understanding, it confuses them, and for people who recently entered Islam. Imagine all the crazy things we see. As someone who entered Islam recently, they go online, what are they going to think? This is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, this is right. Imagine the confusion that social media is creating. And number two, which is probably the more sinister thing, it takes all the energies, all the thinking, all the brain power and time of the Muslims to argue against one another, to engage in petty squabbles, to talk nonsense without going anywhere. And it's really scary because we saw this in societies that declined previously. For examples, when the Ottomans were at the gate of Constantinople, when they had besieged the cities, the scholars, the ulama of the Christians, they were in the Hagia Sophia, what were they discussing? Were they discussing some military strategy? Were they discussing how to get out of the situation? No. They discussed how many angels can descend on the tip of a needle. They discussed Sayyidina Maryam, after Isa alayhi salam is born, is she still a virgin? This was their discussion, internal discord. And what this does, it distracts us from the real issues that the Muslim Ummah is facing, and it goes against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He said, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. The disbelievers, they're allies and protectors of one another. إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا. If you don't do the same, تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. There will be a great evil, there will be great corruption in the land. And it's the same social media content that pumps poison into the minds of Muslims. And sometimes even under the guise of Islam. From things like feminism, red pill ideology, all of this, it seeps into the Muslim minds through this medium. And I want to use an example that happened in the past few years, and maybe it's a bit of a controversial example. It was a shahada taken by a very controversial figure, Andrew Tate. He's known as a red pill kind of ideologist or a red pill proponent. And red pill, just to give a quick summary, it has some family values, some talk of gender roles, how the women and men should be, but generally they view women as a form of conquest. And to put it bluntly, how many women can you get with? That's their values. And when this person took his shahada, I don't know his status anymore, but when he did that, a lot of these channels, a lot of these social media platforms, they invited him on. And they knew the poison that he was saying. And because of that, the Muslim genders, they were at each other's throats. They're arguing, is this person Muslim? How do we deal with this? And the social media influencers, they did this knowing the things he's saying. When Allah said, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ, as the sister mentioned, that the believing men and the believing women, they're supposed to be allies of one another. But this social media, it turned us against each other. And what it also did, perhaps the most disappointing thing, it actually did influence a lot of young Muslim men who were having a crisis of masculinity. If you talk to people, you'll know. You saw it a lot online, but the thing with online, it always seeps into the real world. It did influence a lot of young Muslim men who thought that this kind of thinking is what a real man is supposed to be. This is the ideal man. And think how disappointing it is when we have the example of the Prophet ﷺ as the best man, as a real man. And so it's clear from these examples that the enemies of Islam and the Muslims are ardent, they're hell-bent in sowing this kind of discord. And this can clearly be understood if we look at texts in the past couple of decades from these kinds of organizations and think tanks. For example, the most well-known one, Civil Democratic Islam. I do encourage everybody to read this on their own. And the topic of that booklet or text or that study, it's a little bit different than social media, but it's still relevant. The main topic of that booklet, as the author expresses in the third page, she gets frustrated at how difficult it is to build a new religion. That's basically the synopsis of that text. But in that, they speak about using strategies, using social media, publications, books, all these different mediums of media in general to sow discord amongst the Muslims. And not just to support those organizations which are openly anti-Islamic, but to even support Muslims themselves, which are not politically active, which are more ritualistic. Because internal discord is sometimes much more effective. Actually, most times it's much more effective. And social media and the internet in general has been developed using technologies which were initially created during the World War II and Cold War era. So from that, we know that their primary purpose is intelligence and spying. And this is, it's completely evident now when we see people who are speaking about Gaza, who are speaking about some other atrocities, and sometimes they're not even talking about it in a political way, or as we would say, an ideological way. They're just expressing the horror of this barbarity that's going on, and not even calling to an end to the occupation, but just because of expressing this disgust, they get doxxed, their personal information gets leaked, they lose their jobs, and so on. So it informs us all these services which are developed for us as consumers, they're not just there to make our lives more convenient, to make our lives more easy. In fact, we're not just the consumers or users at all, but we're also the product. We're providing these technologies a service as well with our information, with the way we think, with our inclinations, what are the things we like and what are the things we don't like. And actually, a cybersecurity expert from IAI, which is the Israeli aerospace industries, he mentioned that one of the most effective ways which social media is used right now is to predict the trends of protests. It's to predict and understand a population's general mood. And of course, when they understand this, when they gather this data, it's not just to have a data model, it's not just to understand it, but it's also, of course, to counter emerging events. And even more than that, use social media to build narratives that go against that, especially if these are ideas, especially in the Muslim world or among the Muslims, that go against the status quo, that go against what we would call the world order, or against the puppet regimes. And how this happens is using social media, using bots, and flooding timelines with a certain narrative, flooding our posts with a certain narrative. Because if you repeat it enough times, that the saying that goes, if you repeat something a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. And there's a few examples of that, a few examples in recent events. For example, if we look at events in Syria and the Sahel, if we look at the current Syrian president, Jolani, even before he became the official president, when he was the de facto leader, even before the US lifted the sanctions from Syria, he had begun to take resistance leaders from Gaza that were in Syria and hand them over to the Yahud, even before he got formally accepted into the world order. Now, if you go on social media, the skepticism again among the people who understand, it's there. But in general, you see a barrage of posts. You see so many things where some old clips where he's talking about Jerusalem, he's talking about Palestine, to make him out to be some kind of Muslim hero. And for people who don't keep up with these things, who might not have the strongest grounding in this is a very effective form of propaganda. Like I said, if you repeat a lie enough times, it's true. The same which is going on for this guy, Ibrahim Traore. He fooled the entire continent. He's known as some kind of African Muslim hero who told the West to get lost. But of course, he's in cahoots with the West. And how can he be a pro-African, pro-Muslim hero when he literally raids and kills villages of African Muslims? So these organizations, they look and they analyze the diversity of the Muslim backgrounds, and they look at those things which are the weak links, which are the aspects of jahiliyyah among us, from nationalism, ethnocentrism, and then they ignite these flames. And then finally, I want to touch a bit on tokenism in US media and about selling the Muslim identity. In the past few decades, and especially the past few years, there's been a huge push in American media and Western media in general to be more inclusive of quote-unquote minorities. And as a result of this, we see an explosion of Muslim women in hijab, in ads, in billboards, in movies, in TV shows, children's books, all forms of media. We see it come up so suddenly. But in the same ad where they have a Muslim woman, they'll have a gay, they'll have some guy, you can't maybe even tell his gender. And what does this tell us subconsciously? This tells us that in order to be accepted, and just because we accept you even though you are different, now the Muslim and the homo, they must accept each other. And they must accept each other's values. Subconsciously, this is the ideas that they are planting in us. And especially, they do this with the Muslim women because, of course, the Muslim women, as the Prophet ﷺ described, are the shepherds of the household. They're the shepherds of the next generation. So we are selling our dignity for a little bit of tokenism. And some people even view it as progress. They say, what's wrong? You see more Muslims, it makes us look more normal, etc., etc. And they might not have a strong understanding of Islam as well as American history. They didn't take a hard look at American history. If you look at American history, you look at any of the minorities. For example, if you look at what the African Americans went through, the oppression they went through, and the movements they had to combat it, they were completely decimated. They were completely destroyed. And then a few among them were taken as tokens and given a little bit of power and authority, while the majority of the population was still subjected. But we want to voluntarily subjugate ourselves. We didn't realize that there's no seat at the table for us. As Allah said, وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. That the Yahud and the Nasara, the Jews and the Christians, they'll never be pleased with you. They'll never accept you until you follow their way and you abandon everything from Islam. And another troubling thing is, when we see these depictions of Muslims in movies and cartoons and books, we see most of it is focused on children's media. Because adults, they can see through the nonsense. But a child, especially if they're unsupervised, as the sister was mentioning earlier, when they might see these characters, and if you read a critique of them, most of these characters, they act in an un-Islamic way. What happens usually, especially if they're a woman, they get a bit older, they get liberated, they take off their hijab, they get a boyfriend, sometimes they're even gay. And I'm not even exaggerating, you can do the research on this. So if a child is interacting with this media unsupervised, they don't have, or they're not receiving the correct Islamic tarbiyah, just by identifying with that character. Oh, this character, he looks like me, or it looks like my mom, or my dad, or my brother. This might give them some kind of idea that it is acceptable for Muslims to act this way. And these publications, these media companies, these movies, these TV shows, they are subsidized and funded by organizations whose values are completely contrary to Islam. So it's easier to feed the children a poison which is more familiar to them, because it's easier to digest something which you're more familiar with. So we ask Allah that He protects us from all these evil. We ask Allah that He has mercy on us, our families, our parents, those nearest to us, and the rest of this ummah. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.